So, meine Damen und Herren, dann kommen wir zu einem weiteren Traditionsprogrammpunkt, wenn man das so sagen möchte, denn es gibt einen Wanderpokal, der von einer Studentengeneration zur nächsten jedes Jahr weitergegeben wird. Wenn Sie schon mal bei einer JuDocs-Veranstaltung waren, dann wissen Sie das. Das ist mit guten Wünschen verbunden, von den Altdoktoranden an die Neudoktoranden, wenn man so möchte. Bevor wir dazu aber kommen, werden diejenigen vorgestellt oder stellen sich diejenigen vor, die sozusagen die nächsten Fußstapfen antreten. Und deshalb darf ich auf die Bühne bitten, als Festredner, als Vertreter der Doktorandinnen und Doktoranden Canova und Sebastian Schmitt.
Did you have your strategy for your PhD? Sehr geehrter Herr Professor Marquardt, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Bold, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Schmitt, sehr geehrter Herr Benecke, sehr geehrte Mitglieder des Wissenschaftlich-Technischen Rates, der Sprecherversammlung und des Betriebsrates, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, Professorinnen und Professoren, sehr geehrte Betreuerinnen und Betreuer, dear fellow doctoral researchers, dear fellow graduates. Did you have your strategy when you started your time as a doctoral researcher about 3.5 years ago? For sure, you had at least one big goal. This goal was to get the famous 2 letters in front of your name. And actually, it was not only about these 2 letters. It was about getting some deep insights into specific topics like silicon nanowires for neuronal cell interfacing or redox processes and ionic transport in resistive switching binary metal oxide. And it was about pushing yourself to your personal limit or even beyond. But once again, we would like to ask, did you have a personal strategy?
Well, first we need a working definition of strategy. Nowadays we're all smart, we're all connected via our smartphones and all. So the first place we ask for answers is usually Google or Wikipedia. So let's see what they have to say about this. Strategy is a high-level plan to achieve one or more goals under conditions of uncertainty. Strategy has also recently become one of the buzzwords in the Jülich campus, usually coupled with the word process. Yes, we are talking about the strategy process. You see, the strategy process started about 3 years ago, with the research center realizing that it needed to clarify its goals and strengthen the means to achieve them. There are some people in this room who could elaborate much more on this topic, but for now it should suffice for us to say that even though this particular strategy process will one day be finalized, others will come in its wake. Strategy has to be dynamic. It has to be an ongoing process, capable of adapting to the challenges that arrive with time. You, new doctors, have just achieved one of the biggest goals in your life. But before we focus on what comes next, let's talk about the strategy that got you this far.
Your first strategic decision after signing the Jülich contract was for sure to decide where to live. A former international colleague of mine once stated, if you want to work hard, you live in Jülich. If you want to work harder, you live in Stetternich. For those of you who don't know Stetternich yet, it's the closest village nearby, right behind the fence of the campus. And actually, I think this is true. Living in Stetternich has a lot of advantages. You don't need a car or the Ruhrtalbahn to come to work. You can just walk and you're done with your daily workout. Furthermore, there are not many possibilities in Stetternich where you can spend your money. This means there's also not much distraction from work. And even if there are events like Carnival or Schützenfest taking place in Stetternich twice a year, you can easily escape to Forschungszentrum during the weekends. Did I miss something? Oh yeah, work-life balance. But for us, our work should be our life or vice versa, so this is perfectly balanced by definition. But does this imply that people living in Aachen or Cologne are just lazy and having the wrong work-life balance? Well, that's not necessarily true, because traveling to work from both of these cities is actually hard, adventurous work. If you can't believe this, I would recommend you to take the Ruhrtalbahn on a nice summer day. Actually, you can observe a real-life evolutionary principle there. It's Darwin's survival of the fittest. The problem is indeed if the driver of the train is not one of the fittest and collapses first.
Okay, but once we get here, we can consider ourselves a bit lucky, having this beautiful campus surrounded by one of the last surviving forests in the whole area. It is a nice, peaceful environment, and you can even see some deers or rabbits prancing around the campus from time to time. Very idyllic. So what else do we have? Well, right about the time when we started here, there was a big celebration of having a bus properly connecting the Ruhrtalbahn to the campus. And throughout the last couple of months, about 20 kilometers of new walkways were built inside the campus. Okay, that may be a bit exaggeration, but we did become a more pedestrian-friendly campus. And this should probably convince more people to leave their car behind and use public transportation. We have to wonder, though, how many Ruhrtalbahn trains would be needed to have everyone walking or cycling around the campus? And how full would the only bus connecting to the campus be in the morning, considering it is already operating at maximum capacity? You know, when it's on time. When the bus is not on time, you get to see a very peculiar scene, where scientists use their badges instead of their thumbs to hitchhike the last 1.3 kilometers of their journey to work. However, these scenes have become more rare recently, and even though the improvements might take some time, they eventually arrive. Now, we do have much more on our fascinating campus than these peculiar things, defining it the place to be. We are one of the largest multi- and interdisciplinary research centers in Europe, and experts from Jülich are well known in many different fields of research. If you take one of the guided tours here in Jülich, you will easily learn that we have a couple of the most powerful research facilities and instruments in the world, and our colleagues are engaged in outstanding frontier research. After spending about 3 years here in Jülich, you have just a glimpse about the immense amount of exciting research that can be done within these 2.2 square kilometers. And we think all of you who graduated here would agree that the possibilities to conduct proper research in Jülich are outstanding.
Okay, let's just assume you're one of the adventurous doctoral researchers and you did a very good strategic decision to live in Cologne. One of the next steps might have been to organize yourself with your supervisor, your colleagues within your institute. You learned about your own project and probably about a couple of other projects you were just expected to fulfill by then. You also noticed that social life between you and your fellow doctoral researchers sometimes got difficult, since people from Aachen, Cologne and Jülich need to meet somewhere. The geographical midpoint would have been Düren. But yeah, I think I don't have to say anything more about Düren at this point. So you also probably had a strategy or some kind of plan how to spend the next 3 years within the setting we just tried to sketch here. But then the reality hit hard. Sleepless nights, deadlines rushing by, the constant anxiety and weird feeling that you're not good enough. You, at one point or another, had to neglect family and friends. You had to make choices. Now, it might be easy to forget, but every day you were choosing to persevere, to not give up, to stay awake and fix that one last bug that was bothering you, to get that one equation right, to understand what was going on with a certain reaction. Some of you might even have been braver and have started a family during this phase. But whatever your individual experience was, you can be sure that you shared a lot of it with all the others that achieved the highest academical degree possible. And in fact, the DocTeam is the place for us to meet and to share our experiences. Formerly known as Studium Universale, as we already heard before, we managed to establish ourselves in a more official framework this year in order to improve the communication among us. This has actually worked out quite nice so far, and we are happy that one of the currently elected speakers and one of the older speakers of the DocTeam were invited to spend these few words to you tonight.
Yeah, but enough about the past. It's time to talk about your future. To that end, we borrowed some words from Carl Sagan, one of the greatest science communicators of all time. Carl Sagan once described in great detail how important it is for every person to have a functioning baloney detection kit. Now, for those of you who don't know, baloney is a nicer word for nonsense. And this detection kit is nothing more than the application of the scientific method to all aspects of life. So here are some of these tools, or things you should always keep in mind.
Wherever possible, there must be independent confirmation of the facts.
Encourage substantive debate on all the evidence by knowledgeable proponents of all points of view.
Arguments from authorities carry little weight. Authorities have made mistakes in the past, and they will do so again in the future. Perhaps a better way to say it is that in science there are no authorities. At most, there are experts.
Spin more than one hypothesis. If there is something to be explained, think of all the different ways in which it could be explained. Then think of tests by which you might systematically disprove each of the alternatives. What survives has a much better chance of being the right answer than if you had simply run with the first idea that caught your fancy.
Try not to get overly attached to a hypothesis just because it's yours. It's only a way station in the pursuit of knowledge. Ask yourself why you like the idea. Compare it fairly with the alternatives. See if you can find reasons for rejecting it. If you don't, others will do.
Quantify. If whatever it is you're explaining has some measure, some numerical quantity attached to it, you'll be much better able to discriminate among competing hypotheses. What is vague and qualitative is open to many explanations. Of course, there are truths to be sought in the many qualitative issues we are obliged to confront, but finding them is more challenging.
If there's a chain of argument, every link in the chain must work, including the premise, not just most of them.
Occam's razor. This convenient rule of thumb urges us, when faced with two hypotheses that explain the data equally well, to choose the simpler.
Always ask whether the hypothesis can be, at least in principle, falsified. Propositions that are untestable, unfalsifiable, are not worth much. Consider the grand idea that our universe and everything in it is just an elementary particle, an electron, say, in a much bigger cosmos. But if we can never acquire information from outside our universe, is not the idea incapable of disproof? You must be able to check assertions out. Inveterate skeptics must be given the chance to follow your reasoning, to duplicate your experiments and see if they get the same results.
You, of course, possess all these tools, otherwise you would not be sitting here tonight. But there is one thing that Mr. Sagan forgot, one thing that perhaps was so much second nature to him that he thought it to be obvious, namely the communication of science. I know many researchers see this as a necessary evil, since they would rather spend their time exploring the unknown than explaining their very complex results in layman terms. Nevertheless, the ability to propagate true knowledge is vital, not only for your own career, not only for your own career, but also to ensure that the real message for your story is coming across. By now, you probably know that a Nature paper doesn't necessarily have the most science, but it has the best story. So it is our responsibility to get our points across, to make sure people understand the progress being made, even if at a very basic level. Science is embedded in a context of political and economical interests, not to mention military. Therefore, it is not just a matter of getting more papers published or moving along the tenure track. The way you tell your story matters, and you have to walk the fine line between shallow sensationalism and deep science jargon. And even if you do it right, a more compelling story may appear to sway the masses. So just presenting the facts doesn't work anymore, since even you needed years of proper training to make sense of them. In fact, a recent study showed that as the sheer volume of information increases, polarization will be heightened as well. Most of this polarization will seem baffling to us, like the refusal to vaccinate children or the denial of man-made climate change. But if we scientists are not tuned to the concerns of the general public, then opportunists and demagogues might keep on reigning, and we might as well rot away inside our ivory tower.
So what we are trying to say through all these gloomy assertions is this: the world doesn't need your knowledge, it needs your wisdom. Those two letters in front of your name now mean that you're experts, and your opinion will be carried weight. Whether or not you use this new power is totally up to you. With this being said, we like to come to the end of our speech. Since both of us are not done yet, we have to say we admire you, because you already did it. And we think we can also state this on behalf of all our doctoral researcher colleagues. You are role models to us, the younger generation, and we are proud of you, and we are happy that we had and partly still have you as our colleagues. Here are our wishes for you. Always have a good strategy for you and your life. But when needed, also have the courage to change your strategy. Keep your time in Jülich in good remembrance. Never stop your curiosity. Stay connected to Jülich and all the friends you made here. And of course, always look on the bright side of life. And as a very last hint, we would like to conclude with words having been said by Winston Churchill. However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results.
Carlos Canova und Sebastian Schmitt, herzlichen Dank. Ich hatte eben angedeutet, wenn man den Wanderpokal bekommen möchte, dann muss man sich den verdienen. Ich glaube, mit dieser Festrede haben Sie in sich verdient und deshalb werden wir jetzt zur Überreichung schreiten. Und ich darf begrüßen Alice Klapper, die vom letzten Jahr Sie schon kennen und die damals den Wanderpokal entgegengenommen hat und ihn jetzt sozusagen weitergibt an die nächste Generation. Ein schweres Ding, das wissen wir schon. Frau Klapper, haben Sie gut drauf aufgepasst?
Ja.
Ich habe gehört, Sie waren eine der Ersten, die den einfach mit nach Hause genommen hat.
Ja, den habe ich mir ja verdient und da habe ich gedacht, nehme ich den einfach mal mit.
Ich glaube, im Forschungszentrum hat das für ein bisschen Unruhe gesorgt zwischendurch, weil die alle sagen, wo ist der Wanderpokal? Aber er ist ja wieder aufgetaucht.
Ja, ich habe ihn wiedergebracht.
Und es geht ihm gut.
Ich denke ja.
Dann auf zur nächsten Generation. Geben Sie einen Wunsch mit oder sowas?
Ja, viel Glück für die Promotion.
Das ist, glaube ich, das Entscheidende. Bitte schön. So, dann dürfen Sie jetzt mal ganz exzessiv klatschen. Kommen Sie ein bisschen hier rüber, damit Sie... So, jetzt muss sich nur noch einigen, wer ihn nimmt. Haben Sie das schon? Nee, noch nicht. Erstmal drauf aufpassen. Okay, alles klar. Ja, herzlichen Dank an Sie alle drei und dann scheuche ich Sie jetzt von der Bühne. Vielen Dank.